He never spoke. Not when he entered the town. Not when they insulted him. Not even when they challenged him. And by sunrise, every man who drew against him was dead. But here's the strange part. He never fired a single shot. Deadwood Creek had seen violence. Before shootouts, hangings, drunken brawls that ended in shallow graves. But this was different. Because the men weren't dying by his hand, they were dying in their sleep. And the town began to whisper, was the gunslinger cursed? Or had something followed him into Deadwood Creek? Deadwood Creek sat in a valley. That never felt warm. Even in summer, the sun reached it late and left it early. The wind moved strangely, there, like it circled the town instead of passing through. The locals said the land remembered something. Old something. Angry, most folks ignored. Those stories until the silent gunslinger arrived. He rode in at dusk. Black coat. Dust-covered boots. Wide brim hat casting shadow over his face. 2 revolvers at his sides. But no. Rifle no. Bedroll. No saddlebags. He rode like a man with no destination and no past. The saloon doors creaked. Open as he stepped inside. Conversations stopped. Cards froze mid-air. The piano player slowly lowered his hands. He didn't look at anyone, just walked to the bar, placed a silver coin down, and nodded once. The bartender poured, whiskey hands shaking slightly. The stranger lifted the glass, drank, and said, nothing. Not a word, not a sound. Cat, got your tongue? Someone laughed from the corner. It was Daniel Hargrove. Young, arrogant, quick. With his gun, quicker with his mouth. The stranger didn't react, didn't blink, didn't even turn. That silence. It unsettled people more than anger. What if Daniel stood, walked closer? You deaf? Or just scared? Still, nothing. The whole room leaned forward, waiting. Daniel reached for his revolver, testing. The stranger's hand hovered near his own gun, but he didn't draw, didn't challenge, just stood there, silent, unimoven. Daniel smirked, thought so. He turned and walked out. Laughing, the saloon slowly returned to noise, but the air felt different, heavier. By morning, Daniel Hargrove was dead. They found him in his bed, eyes wide open. No bullet wound, no blood, no sign of struggle, just dead. The town, doctor said his heart gave out. But Daniel was 20-3, strong as an ox. No sickness, no warning. The whispers began before noon. He challenged the stranger, and now he's gone. The silent gunslinger ate breakfast alone that morning. Unbodied, watching, nothing. Listening to everything. Men don't like mysteries. They can't solve, and they don't like. Strangers, they can't control. By the second night, another man tried. Sheriff Boone. Older, more careful, but prideful. He walked into the saloon just before sunset, sat across from the silent gunslinger. I don't like trouble, Boone said. The stranger stared back unblinking. If you're here to start something, you finish it tonight? Still no response. The sheriff placed his badge on the table. If you've got something to say, say it. Nothing. Just silence. The kind that creeps under your skin. The sheriff stood first. Sunrise, he said. If you're still breathing, maybe I'll believe you ain't cursed. He left. People watched the gunslinger carefully that night. Some swore they saw him step outside after midnight. Others claimed he never left his chair. No one agreed. By dawn, Sheriff Boone was dead, same as Daniel, in his own bed eyes. Open, no wounds. No struggle, just silence. That's when fear replaced curiosity. 2 men, 2 challengers, 2 corpses. Before sunrise, and not a single bullet fired. The preacher called it divine judgment. The undertaker called it coincidence, but the miners, they called it a curse. And they began to look at the stranger like he wasn't a man, but something else. On the 3rd night, they decided to test it. 3 men, all armed, all stubborn. They would challenge him together, and they would not sleep. If death came before sunrise, they would face it awake. The saloon was silent as they approached his table. "You hear about Boone?" one of them asked. No answer. "You bring death with you?" Nothing. They spat at his boots. Then they left, laughing nervously. The town didn't sleep that night. Windows stayed lit, candles burned low. The 3 men locked themselves inside the general store. Guns loaded, doors barred. They kept watching shifts. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. They were still alive, still breathing, still armed. At 3 in the morning, something changed. The wind stopped completely. Dead silence. No creaking wood, no insects, no insects, no breath. Just stillness. The first man felt it, like cold fingers brushing the back of his neck. He turned, saw nothing. The second heard something behind the shelves, a whisper, but no words. The third reached for the door and realized it was already open, just slightly, even though they'd locked it. By sunrise, all 3 were dead. Inside the store, no gunshots, no wounds, just the same, frozen expression, like they'd seen something too terrible to scream. The town erupted. Some packed their belongings. Immediately, others demanded the stranger be hanged. "He's bringing it," they shouted. "He's the curse." But here's what frightened them most. He still hadn't drawn his weapon. Not once, not even when accused. He simply sat, watching, silent. On the 4th evening, a woman approached him. Margaret Holy, widow of a miner. She had lost her husband 2 years ago in a tunnel collapse. She didn't scare easily. She sat across from him, studied his face. "You can hear me, can't you?" she asked softly. His eyes lifted, met hers. Sharp, aware. "You don't speak, but you understand." A slow nod, barely noticeable. The first acknowledgement anyone had seen. "Are you killing them?" she asked. Silence. "Or is something following you?" The lantern flickered just for a moment, then steadied. He reached into his coat. Slowly, the entire saloon tensed. But instead of a gun, he pulled out something small, old, wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the table, unfolded it. Inside was a child's wooden carving. A crude little horse, burned at the edge, is charred. Margaret frowned. "What is that?" His jaw tightened. For the first time, there was emotion in his eyes. Pain, regret, fear. Outside, the wind began to rise again, circling the town, like it had been waiting. And somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. Even though no one had touched it, Margaret leaned closer. "Deadwood Creek isn't cursed," she whispered. "It's hunted." The gunslinger's eyes shifted toward the window. Darkness settling over the valley. The 4th night had begun. And this time, something was watching the entire town. Not just the men who challenged him. The 4th night did not wait for midnight. It came early. The wind circled Deadwood Creek like a tightening rope. Dust spiraled through the streets, shutters rattled, dogs howled, then went silent. Too silent, Margaret remained seated across from the gunslinger. The wooden horse between them burned, blackened. Wrong. You brought it with you, she whispered. The gunslinger's eyes closed for a brief second. Not denial, not confession. Recognition, outside. A scream split. The air dot. Not a gunshot, not a fight. Just raw terror. The townsfolk rushed toward the sound. It came from the old boarding house room 12. A man named Curtis, who had sworn loudly that afternoon. He would be the one to end the silent. Stranger. They found him on the floor, alive. Barely. He was shaking, clawing at his own throat. It's in the walls. He gasped. In the walls. Then his eyes rolled back. Dead before the doctor could kneel beside. Him, no wounds, no marks. Just that same expression. Frozen horror, the crowd turned toward the saloon. Toward the man who had never spoken. He's the devil. Someone shouted. No, another cried. He feeds it. Ropes appeared. Fear is faster than reason. They dragged him into the street, tried to force him to his knees. He didn't resist. Didn't reach for his guns, didn't struggle. Just watched them. And then, the lanterns along the street flickered out. One by one. Darkness swallowed the town whole. Something moved behind them. Not footsteps, not wind. Something heavier, like a shadow, peeling itself from the ground. The horses screamed in their stables. Men dropped the rope. Someone fired blindly into the dart. The bullet echoed off the hills. But it hit nothing, because whatever was there wasn't made of flesh. When the lanterns flared back to life, 3 more men were dead, still standing, but dead. Eyes empty, skin pale as ash, and the silent gunslinger. Still exactly where they had left him, unharmed. Watching that was the moment. The town understood it wasn't killing because of him. It was killing for him. Margaret brought him inside the church before the mob could regroup. Locked the doors, only candlelight remained. You owe them the truth, she said firmly. He looked at her long measured, then slowly. He reached inside his coat again, pulled out a folded paper .ol.creased from years of being carried. He handed it to her. She opened it carefully. It was a drawing, childlike, crude. A small family standing in front of a cabin. A father, a mother, a little boy, and behind them, tall dark shape with no face. Margaret's breath caught. What is this? His jaw tightened. Then, for the first time since entering Deadwood Creek, he spoke. One word. Low. Rough. Mine. His voice sounded unused, like gravel dragged across stone. Margaret stared at him. You had a family? A nod. They're dead. A pause, then another word. Burned. His voice came slowly, broken pieces at a time. Years ago, he had lived in a valley, much like this one, quiet. Isolated miners moved in. Money followed. Greed followed. That one night, men came for his land. He fought them off, but he could not stop the fire. He watched his cabin burn, watched his wife scream, watched his son vanish into smoke. And in that smoke, he saw something. Not flame, not man. Something else, something older. It did not speak. It did not move. It only watched. I followed, he said quietly. Margaret felt cold settle in her bones. You followed what? His eyes shifted toward the door. The shadow, he explained in fragments. Every town he entered afterward, men died. Not strangers, not innocents. Only those who carried violence in their hearts. Those who reached for guns. First, those who threatened, challenged, provoked. By sunrise, they were gone. No marks, no blood, just terror, as if something had judged them and found them guilty. It feeds, he whispered, on anger. Margaret's hands trembled. You're saying it's not killing at random? He shook his head slowly. It hunts. The truth spread through the town before morning. Some believed him, most did not, but something else had changed. The challenges stopped. No one insulted him anymore. No one reached for a weapon. The saloon fell quiet. The air grew lighter. For one night, no one died. That's when they realized it wasn't attached to him. It was attracted to them. Their pride, their violence, their fear. Deadwood Creek wasn't cursed, it was exposed. The thing in the dark thrived. Where men did not control themselves, in this town. Had never been gentle, but peace built on fear does not last. On the 6th night, a stranger rode. Drunk, angry, unaware of the whispers. He barged into the saloon, mocked the silent gunslinger, slapped him across the face, drew his revolver. I don't fear ghosts, he laughed. The town held its breath. The gunslinger did not move, did not retaliate, did not even blink. The stranger stormed out, laughing, promising to return at sunrise. He never made it to midnight. They found him in the street, eyes wide, revolver still in hand, dead, and this time there were marks, finger-shaped, bruises around his throat, black burned into the skin. The town broke. Some fled. Before dawn, others barricaded themselves inside their homes. Margaret confronted the gunslinger one last time. You can't stay, she said. His eyes were tired now, heavy. It will never stop if you stay. Silence, then a single nod. He understood. He always had at sunrise. He mounted his horse. No speeches, no goodbyes. Margaret stood at the edge of town. Where will you go? She asked. He looked toward the horizon. Anywhere, nowhere, it didn't matter, because wherever anger ruled, the shadow would follow as he crossed the ridge. The wind shifted, moved with him. Like a loyal companion, Deadwood Creek grew quiet behind him. The sun reached it fully, for the first time in years. And for the first time since his arrival no one died. Before sunrise, they still speak of him in Deadwood Creek, the mute gunslinger, the cursed rider, the man death walked beside. But Margaret Hawley told the story differently. She said, he wasn't cursed. He was carrying judgment, a mirror to men's darkness and the shadow. It was never his servant. It was never his master. It was something born from hatred, drawn to violence, feeding on the worst of them. And as long as men reach for guns before words, the silent gunslinger will never truly ride alone.